Hi, this is just a content warning at the top of this episode. For today's main topic, we talk a lot about the history of Gaza and Israel, with some mentions of the actions that Israel and Palestinians have taken over the course of that history. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Podcasting is Praxis. My name is Alistair, my pronouns are he and him. Rob?
Okay, sorry. Hi, I'm Rob, my pronouns are he and him.
And I'm Jamie, and my pronouns are he and him.
No David tonight, on account of illness. We'll say, sick of life, etc. But in his place, we have YouTuber and academic in genocide studies, John Duncan.
Nice to be your replacement Scottish person for the episode.
Well,
yeah,
it's
thank
union
you for
rules,
being here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
All right. Well, before we get on to the main topic, which is the perennial joy that is talking about Britain's international policy and Gaza, first, I don't want to spend too much time on it because everybody's already said everything, and the people listening to this will not be shocked. But what can you even say about Labour's new immigration refugee policy except that it's some fucking Nazi shit that, all the Nazis are saying this is great because it'll lay the foundation of what we actually want to do when we come into power next. So, well done everybody who's involved in that one, but burn in hell or, see you in the tribunals.
And Labour, being the astute politicians that they are, have done this, gotten uproarious rounds of applause from all of your Tommy Robinsons and whatnot, and yet they are still not going to vote for you. So,
no.
Excellent political calculus.
No, they won't vote for you.
Yeah.
You'll just piss off everybody who might have considered voting for you. Like, you're even, you're losing the John Crace vote. Do you know how hard that is?
John Crace.
John Crace was incredibly normal about this, wasn't he? Like,
he always is, but
but he's writing some weird fan fiction where Shabana Mahmood arrested and deported herself.
Yeah,
fucking hell.
Yeah,
it's just fucked. Like,
they've also lost the Ian Dunt vote, well, presumably up until his brain resets at midnight. I mean, what we need to do is we need to set that guy up with a Memento style of Memento style sticky notes, just so that he can remember what political positions he held 24 hours ago.
Every time he learns a new fact about the case, he has to record it in a podcast for a Ubisoft game.
Oh, Jesus Christ!
I guess you could write it on his head like Bart does with Homer in the space episode.
Yeah, it could be worse, John. You could be recording a podcast with Ian Dunn in a video game as your inaugural podcast debut.
I mean, I did force my supervisor to listen to the Ian Dunn episode that he did on genocide, and I just got the live reaction. Fuck's sake! What the fuck is this? This is nonsense.
just having his entire house filled with Polaroids of Keir Starmer saying, "Do not trust this man."
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on to much happier terrain and sort of slightly more baffling terrain. Our oldest and maybe bestest pal is back.
I mean, we want to before we move on? Do we want to say what they've actually done, just for anyone who hasn't heard it? Because we do have listeners that don't follow British politics, and it is so fucking grim that I feel like we should at least fucking, do you know what I mean? Expressly say what it is that we're fucking criticizing them for. And among a raft of other horse shit, you can't have indefinite leave to remain until you've been a refugee here for 20 years, and they have to check they have to recheck your asylum claim every 30 months, was it? Or
every 2 years, I think.
Yeah, every so often they have to recheck it, and if the country you've come from is deemed safe by the Home Office at that point, then out you go. So you can't like essentially can't settle in Britain. There's no point like trying to build a life for yourself here because you may be forcibly removed at any moment. But at the same time, you also have to like take a citizenship test and learn the language and do volunteer labor in the community and so on. Because if you don't integrate, you're the problem. Clearly, do you know what I mean? But yeah, we could just get rid of you at any moment. But then on top of all that, immigrants are going to have their assets taken to pay for their housing and
I saw one of these pricks saying like, oh, we'll take I can't remember. It's the actual migration minister, whichever fucking monster that is. It's not Shabana Mahmood. It's like one of her minions. And like,
is it the guy that was on Sky?
Yeah. And he was saying like, what we're gonna have to do is like, to pay for their accommodation and whatnot. Like, we're gonna take their e-bikes and cars. And I'm like,
yeah.
I love scooting over with my asylum claim.
Yeah. Like, did I take my Lime scooter like underneath a fucking truck in the channel, or what the fuck do you think is going on around here?
Yeah, all of the refugees who are putting their Teslas into aqua mode, like Elon Musk promised he'd enable them to do, are going to be really like regretting coming here after this.
I mean, I just had an article accepted for publication about the sort of rise in global fascism, where this exact stuff, and we cited, how the Labour Party has decided that they wanted to follow Denmark's example. We, in our paper, cited Denmark's policy of ghettoization, which is, for a while explicitly legally creating what they called ghettos to deal with migrant populations, where they subjected people who were first and second generation migrants, as in people who were born there to migrants, to a different level of policing. They were subject to higher prison sentences. They could have whole families ejected from their housing if one member committed a crime. This is the stuff Labour wants to emulate. And we cited that as one of the examples of how neoliberal politics has morphed and is increasingly morphing through asylum and immigration towards a fascistic politics.
Yeah.
So with, I guess, this is the happy part of the episode.
Yeah. This is actually. Can we move on to like the happier part now? Because I want to talk about our oldest and maybe our bestest friend for a little bit.
We've had a small plate of vegetables before we tuck into a little bowl of ice cream before we get on to
this is your little bowl of ice cream for the for the episode before more vegetables arrive. No, the Ajax is back, baby. It's in field trials now.
And it's still maiming soldiers. It's fucking awesome.
It's still maiming people all over the place. This is from Larissa Brown writing in the Telegraph. Quote, British soldiers who tested the new Ajax armoured fighting vehicle in this summer were so badly affected that they can no longer be deployed overseas. About 10 soldiers who took part in a training exercise on Ajax vehicles in the summer, weeks before the vehicle was declared ready for operations, were sent to hospital for problems including serious headaches, loss of balance, motion issues, and tinnitus, a defense source said, because it's still so fucking loud.
Do you reckon they built these things and they were like to support like an LRAD system, but they've accidentally put the wires in the wrong way around, so it's just broadcasting that shit into the vehicle?
I don't know what's going on, but like it's fantastic because like the sound and the vibrations were like have been the core of the problem with this fucking thing since like
that and the radiation.
Day one. Yeah. But apparently, not even the following has solved this. Soldiers using the Ajax are now given dual-layer headsets with an inner earpiece and an outer cover in an attempt to not solve but mitigate problems arising from the noise of the vehicle. It is understood that when soldiers dismount, they remove the outer piece, exposing them to a greater noise level when the vehicle is still running. So, like, if you get out of the thing and you have to, like, talk to each other, so you have to, like, remove part of your, hearing protection, and you stand next to the vehicle, it still deafens you.
Oh, yeah, we built... I love that the Ajax is just built at the exact resonance frequency of the human skull. That's so good.
It's positively magnificent.
How much money has this taken so far to develop?
Oh, fuck, I don't remember off the top of my head, but several billions at least. Like, when the Times visited General Dynamics last week, a meter on a mobile phone showed a reading of 90 decibels from a few meters away.
Jesus Christ.
If you don't know what 90 decibels is, by the way, that is roughly the same as, like, two people standing next to you having a very loud shouting argument. Like, that's kind of the vibe that we're going for. But yeah, don't worry about it. The MOD has, several weeks after several, of the people manning the things were, de facto deafened or, permanently incapacitated with tinnitus, were still, they've certified that it's actually okay because General Dynamics said, don't worry about it.
Oh, well, I'm assured.
Yeah.
It just works at destroying the human eardrum.
It's
cool.
It's fantastic.
I think it's a pretty radical act for the British military to deafen itself, actually.
I think, yeah. I mean, if it's intentional, then it's.
I'm going to get inside the Ajax fighting vehicle so that I can no longer hear criticisms that people are leveling at me.
So there's one more thing I wanted to talk about, which is weirdly enough sort of a response to one of the people on our Discord who was asking, like, how could it possibly be bad when the AI bubble pops when my life is so shit already anyway? Which, that is a fair point. And in answer to it, there was a really good piece in the Wall Street Journal this week by Matt Wirtz and Peter Rudiger about basically, the sort of extreme volume of bets and what it might mean if the whole thing goes sideways. It centers on a company called Blue Owl Capital, which is one of those investment firms, and they are like the focal point for the financing of a lot of data center construction that's going on in the UK, specifically in the US, but a lot of the money that needs to go into AI needs to go into building all these data centers, supplying them with power, and buying all these insanely expensive NVIDIA chips that need to go in them in order for, the God in the machine to arise, basically.
It's always good when you hear about a little known venture capital firm called Blue Owl. Like, that's the kind of name you will never have heard of until suddenly you're hearing about it in newspapers, on TV, and about how bust they're going, and then all of a sudden, lots of other bad things start happening as well. Something as innocuous as a little blue owl.
You would be right, because this is, to quote the article, Blue Owl Capital is an upstart investment firm that lent money to mid-sized US companies such as Sara Lee Frozen Bakery, before they got huge and got into the AI construction boom, basically.
What a CV.
I know. So, basically, tech firms aren't, for the most part, they don't finance these data centers themselves. Like, Amazon spends, a shit ton of money, and as does Facebook, as do all the other majors. But, they finance a lot of construction through various, lease and use constructions, or they get this company called Blue Owl into where they pay in some of the money, and Blue Owl rounds up a whole bunch of other investors, and then that spreads the cost around, but also that spreads the risk around the economy. Because even the Silicon Valley giants, even Amazon and Facebook, they don't have the most ready capital to fully finance everything. So it goes through places like Blue Owl, but Blue Owl also doesn't have the necessary capital to fund everything itself. So what they do to build a data center is they put in 10% of their own money, and then the other 90% comes from other investors. They seek out banks, pension funds, everything normal financial institutions, and say, hey, look, if you help us finance this thing, we'll pay, you'll get 6.5% interest every year. And that way, more and more finance and more normal, quote unquote, financial authorities are being dragged into this construction game because the returns are so good. And
I've
basically,
placed 6 bombs throughout the city. Can you find them all in time?
I love when a chain has no chance of having a reaction on it. It's great.
Exactly. Nothing can go wrong in this system. And the way Blue Owl essentially makes money is that they get paid about 13% in lease costs for from the people who then lease the data center that they've built, and they pay out 6.5%. So like the 6.5% in the middle, that's the money Blue Owl is doubling its money essentially. So like everybody makes an insane amount of money except the people who like lease the data centers, who have to pay 13% of the initial of the costs year on year to make use of all these data centers and burn through NVIDIA chips essentially.
Yeah, and
in terms
what was OpenAI's expenditure for this year or losses for this year? It was some ridiculous amount of money. Like I can't remember. Was it 25 billion or 2.5 billion? Genuinely,
well, I think you'll find, Alistair, that actually it doesn't matter. This is from the article again. Quote, "We are talking about numbers that are so large, even in the low cases," said one of Blue Owl's co-founders. "Does it even matter if you keep counting after you get $1 trillion of capital expenditure in the next few years?"
Oh, Christ alive.
The numbers are so big, you don't have to keep counting. There's just infinity of money one can casually assume.
Oh my god.
$1 trillion of capital expenditure. I'm sure if $1 trillion is in something, that can only ever go well.
I mean, I don't really particularly care about a lot of this, but I'm like, look, I think even if it's above $1 trillion and you're the guy collecting the money and then paying it back out to pension funds and shit, I do think it's important you keep counting. That seems kind of important to the whole process.
I mean, why even bother having compliance, accounting, things like this when you're just talking? The numbers are so big, Rob. Have you ever seen a number bigger than 1 million? I don't think so.
No, this is certainly fundamentally true, and it's just to put it in a bit more perspective. Everybody is so keen to get in on this, and that's not necessarily because everybody thinks that AI will produce the God in the machine. It's FOMO. The Wall Street Journal makes this very clear. It's a lot of people are investing because the theory is what if you don't invest? What if you didn't invest? What if you got left out? What if you got left behind? The craze in Bored Apes, let's say.
Yeah, what if you miss out on investing in the tech singularity? What then? What happens if someone generates infinity dollars? Then, you'll be looking like a right rube. Yeah. I mean,
that is genuinely, that is the bet. That in the next 3 to 5 years, these companies, Sam Altman or Anthropic or whoever, will invent the God in the machine, and therefore that will fundamentally reorganize society. And if you are a part owner of that particular company or that particular technology or a subsidiary part of that, nothing else matters because you now you are a fucking timeshare owner in the God in the machine, and that will pay back infinity dollars forever.
Can only go up, baby.
It's insane. Recently, Morgan Stanley, one of the American mega banks, completed $75 billion worth of data center deals in 1 week. In 1 week, that why is it? No, well, I mean, it's either the sign of the hype cycle and bubble reaching a very terrifying stage, or it's just, well, I'll quote you the Wall Street Journal again. Investor appetite for data center debt is so strong that some money managers have booked billion-dollar gains in a matter of days, even before construction of the facilities they are financing is complete. Because what they're doing is they buy a shit ton of this debt, and then four days later, the fucking the pension fund for government employees in the UK comes by and says, "Oh my god, you have some of the highest paying, coolest debt in the world. Can I buy it off you?" And they just say yes. Book a real billion in actual gains, and then transfer this long-term debt onto the books of other people who are just as hyped as they are. You know, like you could buy a tulip bulb today, right? And that sucker can only go up in value.
Yeah, pumpkin stocks have been going up all through the month of October.
Yes. Yeah.
The only thing I can sadly, the only thing I can think of when someone mentions tulips now is the bad Tulip Fever movie that my mate was an extra in, which was a massive flop. Which is indicative of something. Art imitates life, I'm told.
Mm. Is that different from the good Tulip Fever movie?
I think it was like 10 years ago or something.
So in a way, to sort of by give a more specific example of this, Blue Owl Capital is organizing the financing of, many, but this is a specific one, of a giant new data center in Abilene, Texas, which, if it's completed and as it's completed, will need to draw on 1.2 gigawatts of power, which is roughly the same to power 1 million American homes, I should say. So like 7 million European ones, one assumes.
Should I just pull up that graph of Chinese solar panel expansion again?
No.
Here's what you could have won.
Like, you could also pull up the graph of Texas power outages. That's also a very funny one in this particular context.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? Solar panels are woke, though.
That's true. They really are very woke. So, Oracle has leased, it's being built, the building is being financed by Blue Owl Capital, but Oracle has already leased the whole site for 15 years. And will pay for it, or it thinks it will pay for it, wholly on OpenAI, because OpenAI will pay Oracle $300 billion for the use of the data center built by Blue Owl Capital but leased by Oracle, and also the 500,000 shiny new NVIDIA chips that are going to go into the data center.
I'm reminded again, like talking about NVIDIA chips, that analysis that Michael Burry, that guy from The Big Short, did on, basically these guys are all lying about the life cycle of these chips to keep everything afloat. So again, let's just start pulling bits out from this Jenga tower and seeing what stays up.
Yeah, so these NVIDIA chips are critical, but it's really weird because NVIDIA has also committed $100 billion, up to $100 billion, to fund OpenAI. And OpenAI pays Oracle for the use of the site, while Oracle also pays NVIDIA for the chips. So essentially, they're just running money around in a circle until those chips burn out, which they inevitably will.
Yeah, it's like how poor people are just constantly sending each other the same £100 over PayPal at the end of every month. Do you know what I mean? It's my turn on the mutual aid this week, so you just keep passing the same money backwards and forwards. Except the entire economy is resting on the back of this.
However, still not everything well. Quote the article: the longer-term performance is hardly assured. Big tech companies are expected to spend nearly $3 trillion on AI through to 2028. So, not on fixing the climate or, many of the other actual things that need to be...
AI will fix the climate and everything else, haven't you heard?
It will, yeah. But they will only generate enough cash to cover half that tab. So even in the most optimistic scenario, in the next 3 years, the big major tech companies will, on purpose, lose $1.5 trillion to build the God in the machine.
Yeah, I like that you almost said next 3 billion years there, because if they had 3 billion years, they still wouldn't get an LLM to become sentient to fix climate change. So,
have you ever seen William McCaskill's TED Talk?
Yes, I have seen that.
Yeah, well, obviously, integrated within all the OpenAI folk, the long-termists are big investors in that area. Glad that Aaron Bastani had him on a podcast to promote them.
Yeah. But, fuck me, I forgot he did that.
William, I like to get a bit of Aaron Bastani shit talking in early. But in William McCaskill's
this is the
TED
podcast
Talk,
for it.
Yeah.
He grafted a line graph of human progress by time, and he
I think I've heard about this. Yeah.
Yeah, he traced progress as it was flat. There was zero human progress anywhere in the world until the Industrial Revolution. Then it shot up. So let's put several things to aside for now. What he then did was projected that 2 million years into the future, and the graph just kept going up. And he pointed at one point and said, here's where we'll get the AI singularity and all the artificial consciousnesses that we now have to account for in long-termism. And it's this point that progress just shoots up, and we are fucking to the moon. Everything's fine. So give us money.
I love it whenever
people give him money.
Whenever we're confronted by one of these just total cranks, I'm always asking the question of, can you please define your terms for me?
Yeah, what is progress?
Yeah,
well, I mean, progress is
no
making
progress
sure
until
that
the Industrial Revolution. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that the steam engine just sprang forth from the earth and was discovered by some guy like Mr. Watt in a field, and he thought, yes, I will use this to create modern capitalism. Yeah, okay.
So to briefly come back to the original question before we get to the main section, how does any of this basically like impact you? Maybe if it all goes bang. Quote from the article: if the AI market blows up, the blast radius would be wide, hitting not only Wall Street firms but also pensions, mutual and exchange traded funds, and individual investors because of how the debt is sliced and resold across the financial landscape.
There's those bombs I was talking about.
Yeah. The bonds financed by Meta's Hyperion data center. Fuck.
Oh, Christ alive.
Names.
These fucking guys are named like WoW guilds. It's awful.
It's so embarrassing that the world's going to get ended by a bunch of fucking mill houses.
Yeah.
The bonds, financed by Meta's Hyperion data center in Louisiana, can be found in Main Street funds offered by BlackRock, Invesco, Janus Henderson, and PIMCO. Investors in Blue Owl's latest $7 billion digital infrastructure fund include the state pension plans of Pennsylvania and New York. So, like, basically, how does a fall in, like, data centers precipitate a global financial crash? Well, much like how does a fall in Florida real estate and McMansions, precipitate a global financial crisis. So it's because it's the same thing. It's not so much that the crash of those things themselves is the problem. It's the problem is that so much money has been tied into it by pension funds, normal banks, non-bank private credit lending. Like the debt that is fueling all this nonsense is fucking everywhere. And if the debt is no longer worth what it says on the tin, which is the same thing that happened in 2008, then a lot of institutions either are bankrupt or could be bankrupt, which is much the same, because then nobody trusts the system anymore, because any of your trading partners could be bankrupt. It's literally the same as what happened in 2008. The thing that made like Florida real estate crash the global economy is that all banks and like a lot of major institutions could no longer trust that their counterparties were still solvent. And much the same can or will happen in the event of like a catastrophic meltdown in the AI valuation. Up to and including the point where like money won't come out of the fucking, cash points anymore.
Yeah. Well, I think the important thing is that we haven't learned any lessons from last time.
Oh, God, no. Well, the one thing we have learned is that like, as long as you put on your like massive investment fund and like massive pool of money, you put a little sticker on the door saying not a bank, then you can do all kinds of crazy shit.
Cool.
So, that I hope that answers your question. And let us now turn for more good news. Let us now return. It's been a long time since we've talked about Gaza. Not because I don't think we don't want to, it's just because it's so depressing that I don't know how to talk about it, essentially. Hi, this is Rob. I'm disturbing your delightful in-ear entertainment to tell you that we have a Patreon at patreon.com/praxiscast. You can go there for more episodes, our Discord, bonus clips, and much, much more. This is also me begging you for your money in exchange for goods and services. Thank you. Oh, very well then. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Get ourselves some snacks. Bye.
Before we get a bit more stuck into it, I do have a little bit of an introduction for this section because, you know, there is so much to be said about the genocide in Gaza. How it's a blight on the entirety of the Western world. There's so much that's come out of Gaza from the indescribably brave Palestinian journalists who've, you know, quite literally given their lives to document what is happening to them, as well as every single TikTok from blood-crazed IDF soldiers riding high on their impunity as they document their innumerable crimes against humanity. I don't want to focus too much on this stuff today, these particular aspects, as there's been a lot of toing and froing that's already taken place in the wider, you know, scare quotes discourse about what it all means. So I think it's best if we take all those videos, pictures, just as read. We don't need to exaggerate what's been depicted, but what might be useful is to ask ourselves how we got here, what is the meaning of the Western response, and what could happen next. None of the co-hosts of this podcast are anything like an expert of Arab-Israeli geopolitics, so most of our considerations should be concerning the culpability and responsibilities of the Anglophone West, particularly, of course, the UK.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to hear about Palestinians, and you can hear from Palestinians about their own experiences, and, you know, I don't think it's our place. And also, quite frankly, if we wanted to cover the whole thing from all angles, we would never stop recording. So we have to limit ourselves a little bit too.
Yeah, and this is why I wanted John to come on tonight, because being a scholar of genocide, it is, you know, we have to come at this from some angle, and being a, you know, primarily a British podcast, we should be looking at what our role is, what our role was, and what that could mean for the UK in the future, as well as any effects that, you know, our complicity could have in the future.
Yeah, I mean, So I would say I'm also, while I'm probably an expert in terms of genocide, ecocide, and that has given a fair amount of expertise in the context of Palestine. I'm not an expert in Arab-Israeli content either.
No.
So my knowledge of this and my ability to filter it through will be filtered through the lens of critical genocide studies, and various things that I can bring to that in this conversation might relate to, say, the neoliberalization of the occupation through the Oslo Accords, or the ongoing imperial domination that is facilitated by, like, the current, you know, just this evening, UN resolution which has passed to approve of the essentially Trump's plan to manage the Gaza Strip. Which
that's particularly gross. Yeah,
it's horrendous, but it is completely in keeping with the long-standing colonial dynamics at play. We're essentially appointing a global colonial administrator to continue and facilitate the annexation of the land and the control of the land.
Is Tony Blair still up for a role for that? Because that was like the whole conversation a couple of weeks ago.
I think
that, like, he was going to be, I don't know, fucking High Overlord or whatever the fuck they were going to name him.
Wasn't he too much even for, you know, the maniacs talking about, you know, taking over Gaza? That's the last I remember hearing.
I believe he's still involved, but his role was exaggerated in the immediate reporting, probably by him. I think he still has an advisory role because he's, fucking in and about the Arab Middle East peace processes, as he likes to say, and he's been in that sort of space, bathing in blood for decades now.
Yeah.
Well, he's just a realist, John. Look, you have to make hard choices, and Tony Blair is simply there to make hard choices and cash the big check. And I don't think you should be too negative about that.
No, he loves making deals, and only the
Trump
best people love
time.
making deals.
Yeah. So, as I say, I think the first question that is probably on anyone's mind really is how did it come to this? How did we get here? And this could very much have been the single longest question that we've ever asked ourselves on this podcast. Suffice to say, that is very convenient for Israel and its Western allies and supporters to declare that it all started on October the 7th, 2023. You could go back to 2005 when the blockade of Gaza by Israel began. 1967 and the Six-Day War, where Israel began its occupation of Gaza and the West Bank in earnest. 1948, when the British mandate over Palestine was terminated, sparking the bloody Arab-Israeli War of that same year, with Israel proclaiming its independence. 1917 and the Balfour Declaration, British government stating it supported a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, or even as far as the late 19th century, as the ideology of Zionism was being developed, aiming to create an explicitly Jewish state in Palestine. All of this is to say there is a great deal of history leading to the violence of October the 7th in 2023 and the ensuing genocide.
Yeah. Things do not happen in a vacuum.
Yeah, much as everybody likes to pretend that they do. That October 7 was some kind of one-off unique event that, just happened, I suppose.
Yeah, and, of course, the British government having, operating a colonial empire up until its, gradual dissolution in, the mid-20th century. We have our hands all over this, and where the British government is now and its position, in any just world, we would be doing the just total polar opposite of anything that we are doing right now based on what we have already done.
No, I think it is also worth mentioning that the recent report by the Special Rapporteur on the Occupied Areas basically laying out that Western nations weren't just, they weren't just facilitating this, they weren't just complicit, but have been actively involved in it. So when we say, I guess, that this, I guess we can talk about how that we shouldn't just call the Gaza war the only genocidal moment in this story. It's a long-standing genocide, but this current intensification of the genocide is directly being done by us, not just by Israel. It is being done by the British state and the US state. It is a multi-nation genocidal effort, which, that's important, I think, to keep in mind throughout all of these discussions. And why people are, why are so many people protesting this and not something else? It's like, we are doing this right now in our countries.
I think either we are doing this actively, participatively, or at least you could also make the same case that it could not be done without us in a very material way, without or either the diplomatic cover or the guns and the bombs and the parts that we provide or the intelligence. It could not be done without the active participation of the West.
And it's also go on.
I was just going to say, people are quick to point out how little, in terms of sheer amount of weaponry, Britain sells to Israel, but that's obviously a small part of a much larger problem. And also, small amounts of arms can have critical roles within the larger military effort. Like these parts are essential parts for the production of certain of jets mainly. The smallness of our arms trade shouldn't disguise the fact that we are deep in the blood of this.
Yeah, and Britain's role, even preceding October the 7th, has had a significant role to play in laying the groundwork for that violence to have occurred in the first place. Like, if not make it an inevitability, then to make it increasingly more probable as we continue to, status quo ante, if we had carried on, there would be some kind of pressure relief valve in some form. We cast our minds back to, the Great March for Return, a peaceful protest against the border fence of Gaza, which was met with what? Sniper bullets. Like, it's just...
Yeah. I'm also strongly reminded of the episodes we did about Libya with November Kelly, where, like, again, we may not have been, like, the biggest provider there either, but, like, we did, sell the Gaddafi regime, the fucking sniper rifles and the tear gas grenades when, he was being overthrown. Until we changed our minds and overthrew him, of course, because then it was important. But, yeah, like, that kind of stuff, it's what John was saying. It's like, it might be a small thing, but, like, it's not entirely out of the question that they, that we sold them the sniper rifles with which to do it.
Yeah, and I'm sure if Britain's empire hadn't begun to unravel in the wake of World War II and ceased being, I should say, the global hegemon, a role that was increasingly taken up by the United States, would we have decreased our role in Middle Eastern politics, particularly that part specifically, Gaza and the formation of Israel? Unlikely, I think.
No, I mean, like, it's a very good example of tracing the changeover of the guards, essentially, of global hegemony, the transition of occupied Palestinian territory from direct British, I guess, control or guidance to American support in the 67 war, which was as much facilitated by fears of oil shock pricing, obviously being like leading up to the oil shocks that happened later on, but that was part of US support, was acknowledging that having Israel in control in that area was essential for maintaining smooth transition of oil throughout the area, and like making sure that the wave of pan-Arabist anti-colonial movements was in some ways suppressed. That was an essential part, and there's no way, like, if Britain had not declined, that Britain would, of course, have been involved in that. And then on top of that, the sort of material kind of processes, you've got the wider problems of Israel has always been set up as a European frontier to stop the threat of the dangerous Arab. And this is like explicit in Zionism. It's an explicit feature. It's pretty much said constantly throughout any era of Zionism that you're looking at. We are here to stop the barbarians at the gate. We are the ones who will stop the barbarian hordes of Palestinians, of Muslims, of terrorists at the gate, and you need us.
It echoes back in slogans like "We are the only democracy in the Middle East," and that kind of shit.
Yeah, and even just like the construction of the figure of the terrorist, which has become so endemic throughout the West as this fear that we all have, which goes back to some of the anti-immigration attitudes that we have as well. That's something which only became constructed in relation to Palestine. Edward Said talked about it in the 70s, the figure of the terrorist starting to emerge as this great other that needs to be attacked. And Palestine has been at this sort of axis point of this kind of development of Western politics for a long, long time.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said for like the role of the West doing things like, well, being involved in all of the things that Israel has done in the Middle East for the last 60, 70 years, being a testing ground for all kinds of neo-colonial activity that has, surprise, surprise, begun to boomerang back around to the metropole, which is. So Shabana Mahmood, I feel like a fairly prime example of that. Fascist rhetoric coming back to Britain and just being now this is like mainstream Labour Party policy, and Gaza is where a lot of this stuff was tested out. Include you don't even have to think about the role that. Israel's violence against Palestinians has had in teaching American cops and British cops as well how to deal with crowds, how to deal with protests, how to deal with terrorists as they are constructed.
It's one of those things that I think is like a sort of something that we don't talk about enough. Is that like while this genocide is going on and was going on for the last 2 years, Israeli arms manufacturers were very explicit in saying that this is a testing ground. This is a showcase for us to show our latest tools in, riot suppression, urban combat. We have all these new tools and we'll sell them to you because we've proven that they work. Looking at what fucking Donald Trump is doing at the moment in America with his refugee roundups and, that just out and out fascist behavior. It's like, it's very much like, these techniques coming to a street near you soon.
Yeah. And so when we talking about the US, we have to, I think it's good to remind ourselves as well that, when Israel declared independence, such as it was in 1948, Harry Truman immediately accepted that and, unilaterally recognized Israel, which was on the day that the British mandate ended. There are a few other things I think that is also it's worth bearing in mind as well, because probably the most significant events pertinent to our episode today are the Green Line and the Oslo Accords. Just so everyone's aware what those are. The Green Line represents borders for Israel that were defined after the armistice of the Arab-Israeli War in 1949. These are the 1967 borders that you all may have heard of in the news, etc. These are, I believe it's the UN recognized demarcations for Israel. These borders were unsurprisingly totally disregarded by Israel in the aftermath of the 6-day war of that same year.
Yeah. It's like whenever you hear, Starmer or anybody talk about, a return, a two-state solution and the 1967 borders, this is what they are functionally, talking about.
Yeah, and it's just it's a radically smaller iteration than where Israel currently, literally occupies. The other thing to bear in mind, the Oslo Accords, these were two sets of agreements between Israel and the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, in 1993 and 95. The Accords were intended to somewhat normalize relations between Israel and the PLO. It created the Palestinian Authority as a civil authority over the West Bank and Gaza, and that was led by Fatah, which was one of the factions within the PLO. The Accords were also to be the basis upon which a final and lasting peace process could take place. And I think it's fair to say the Accords can more or less be seen to have failed when the Second Intifada began in September of 2000.
Yeah, it's... Sorry, John, you go.
I was just... One of the things that I think is... Like, we mentioned that that Israel's occupying the certain areas of Palestine. What the Oslo Accords essentially did is legitimize an occupation across the entirety of Palestine. So when you look at maps, and there's like popular maps where you look at the decline of Palestinian land, and these days you look at the map and people are like, oh, Gaza, that's still Palestinian, and areas A, B, and C are technically Palestinian land. That's not really true. These accords, Israel controls all of this land, and the UN accepts that Gaza's under colonial control. Areas A, B, and C are effectively under Israeli control. It's just legitimized under a notion that it is a trade agreement, essentially. It's kind of couched in a neoliberalized language. And it was always, from the very beginning, really, really roundly opposed by huge amounts of Palestinians. Like, Edward Said called it a Palestinian Versailles, essentially appeasement, because it allowed Israel to control everything. And like part of how absurd it is that the vast majority of resources, including water resources, are under the control, officially under the control of Israel. And it's impossible to see how you could be like, well, obviously Palestine and the Palestinian Authority has some, effective control over this land. It doesn't. It has no control over this land. The Palestinian Authority is understood as a sort of puppet or vassal state. Yeah. And that's why when Trump accidentally cut off funding to the PA, a lot of Palestinians were like, fucking grand. Good job. You're too stupid to have realized this is exactly what we wanted.
And not the Oslo Accords were so obviously terrible, essentially, though they were in the eyes of Palestinians, still an absolute punch in the face for a lot of Israelis, with Yitzhak Rabin being assassinated in 1995 because he signed them. Like, there's just no pleasing them.
You've created a context, and this gets into the sort of stuff where I do have some degree of like knowledge and expertise in, is that when you have constructed a colonial context where one group of people has a more legitimate claim to a land than another, you have to dehumanize the other. And that creates a fascist mindset, a genocidal mindset. You cannot live on a land and not dehumanize the people you're actively kicking out. It's why, when one of the Pankhurst sisters went to Australia, she went there as a communist and then emerged a few years later as a fascist. And I remember someone talking to us, we don't really know what happened there. It's like, she went to Australia, where it's a settler colonial state. And if there's one way to make an English person more racist, it's send them to Australia. And that's what happened.
Yeah, I mean, the first round of the Oslo Accords in '93 was essentially a big chunk of that was to get the PLO to recognize Israel as a right to exist and all this, and to get Israel to but essentially acknowledge that the PLO existed at all as representatives for Palestinians. And if your mindset is that these are not people, these are Untermenschen, essentially, whose land is ours. Yeah, I can absolutely see how you would take that as an assault on your impunity as a superior person in a place, and obviously radicalize some people to the point that you assassinate your own prime minister.
Yeah, and I guess to give it a kind of, to place it all in a wider context of how we understand colonialism and genocide to be interlinked, I think it's important you kind of go back to the work of Raphael Lemkin, who was the coiner of the term genocide, and he drafted the Genocide Convention. So there's all this argument and debate about whether or not Israel is actually committing genocide, or is it, we can't say anything until the fucking court comes in.
Yeah, is it sparkling mass slaughter, or is it genocide? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And within critical genocide studies, there's decades people have been talking about how intent has essentially been used to obfuscate genocidal acts. None of this is new. But Lemkin originally tied colonialism and genocide together explicitly. He spoke about how the famous quote is that genocide is the destruction of the national pattern of the oppressed group and the imposition of the national pattern of the oppressor. Whether or not that is included, whether or not that means the national pattern is just on the land from which a particular group has been completely excluded, or whether those people are assimilated into a settler structure itself. It's explicit. And so you see it from the earliest waves of colonization of Israel. They kick people out of their land. They appropriated farmland. They planted new forms of new trees. The pine plantations that they brought in. Oh
yeah, the ones that burned down.
Which are now burning down because they're not suited for that climate. But they took huge amounts of water, which destroyed other local farm areas. Then they essentially overtook Palestinian agriculture, so olive farming and citrus farming, and start calling it their own. Like, there's jokes all over about Israeli food, and people are like, oh, this is Israeli oranges, or Israeli olive production. But really, it's Palestinian. It's just been appropriated. And, a very famous example would be Jaffa of the cake fame, which was very well known for its oranges, but Jaffa doesn't exist anymore. It's Tel Aviv. It's a neighborhood of Tel Aviv. All these features are part of what was the cultural makeup of Palestinian life. The agriculture, the form of community, the form of nationhood, which has been systematically destroyed and undermined over the past 100 years. And that is the genocidal process we're talking about. It is the urge to destroy Palestinian people as a people, whether that's through killing or ethnic cleansing or cultural destruction, renaming cities, renaming the land, just getting rid of any vestige that this is a type of people. And that's why Golda Meir said there's no such thing as a Palestinian people, because there can't be for Israel to exist. Israel is predicated on the destruction of Palestinian people as such, which is why they cannot accept a two-state solution. They can only accept the complete eradication of Palestinians as a people, as a culture, as a group, on the land entirely.
And also, I think, psychologically, and sort of to tell yourself you're in the right while you're doing all this, you have to tell yourself that you are not doing this, that you are a good person still, or that you are, that the people whose lands you are dispossessing, because, until you destroy them, until you get rid of them, they are still your neighbors. You have to tell yourself a story about how they're not really people, they're not, or the other great classic justification for genocide, of course, is if we don't do it to them now, they will most assuredly do it to us. So, you have to make these people the enemy. And again, that is not new. That's we saw that in Rwanda, and we saw that in Nazi Germany, and we saw that everywhere else. You have to create an other who is, again, not new, but is simultaneously so weak as to be easily crushed, but also so strong as to be a mortal threat to your existence.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I think this brings us on to what I'm going to liberally term the current state of Gaza, starting with the blockade of Gaza in 2005. That involved Israel militarily crushing the Second Intifada, which precipitated in part that blockade. And with that, I think it's a good time to move on to our second question of the evening, is the West, its response, and what its responsibilities are. Although proposed prior to the Oslo Accords, since those accords, the position of Britain and much of the West has been to support a two-state solution. This would mean that Israel and Palestine would exist as two sovereign neighbouring states. This is certainly a more plausible position to have in the wake of the Oslo Accords. The two-state solution has been used as a fig leaf for Western leaders to project a moral stance of supporting Palestinians and their right to self-determination, alongside provision of aid to the blockaded Gaza Strip. In addition to words of condemnation for Israel, each time it guards settlers as it allows them to steal more Palestinian land, or otherwise enact violence in ways that generate unsavoury headlines in the West. But in the current era, has almost never substantially withdrawn any material support for Israel.
Yeah, I think that has been one of the most shocking things that certainly since October 7 that and the weird thing is right now in my head what I want to do is to say, the events of October 7 were horrific and should have happened, blah blah blah, and already produced that kind of caveat, which is weird because yes, obviously they were, but it's weird that even in my head, and I'm very far from, being an Israel apologist or whatever, but I find myself being conditioned to say these things where I shouldn't have to. That now,
yeah,
the mask is has just come off, and it doesn't seem to matter at all anymore. Israel could just do whatever the fuck it wants, despite all the images, all the video coming out of Gaza of what's going on, and it's just, I wonder where that turn came from, because even Ronald Reagan or Bill Clinton would just end the violence with a phone call because they could and still can.
Yeah. Well, what's grown in the wake of the 2005 blockade is the electrification of that third rail that is occupied Palestine and Israel. Popular resistance to blanket Western support for Israel has become so untouchable that it was and is cause for careers to be ended and hounding out of public life altogether. See American state laws such as Texas requiring pledges not to support BDS to receive emergency aid, and see Israel supportive politicians and media in the UK mobilising to defeat Corbynism as a political force in the mid 2010s. It's been just continuous Hasbara for, well, certainly for the last 20 years, obviously before that as well, but this has been very keenly felt in the last 20 years.
No, my theory about what is different now from the 80s or the 90s or the 2000s is the West's own ramping up an obsession with immigration and our own sort of national othering of Arab peoples, of Middle Eastern peoples, Muslims. Western countries and liberal democracies specifically, and the liberals within those democracies even more specifically, have in the last 10 years or the last 15 years, certainly post 9/11, created such a violent atmosphere that its populaces are so much more predisposed to see Muslims as non-human in the first place, inside their own country, that Palestinians are even more of a non-people, that you can't sort of separate our own sort of increasingly hysterical denunciations of everything Muslims are and do from how we then treat, or how we let Israel treat Palestinians. I think those two are intimately connected.
Yeah, that was very similar to what I was going to say, because I think one of the major changes is obviously the geopolitical landscape has changed significantly. In the 80s and the 70s, the main geopolitical boogeyman was, of course, communism. The Cold War was ongoing. Since the fall of the Berlin Wall, the major boogeyman has changed to the Arab. That has become the Western hate figure. And that is so bound up with Palestinians and Palestinian liberation that it has been increasingly normalized to just execute them, murder them en masse. And that has been, I think, one of the reasons that the increasingly hard right Israeli government has been fine with it, just murdering Palestinians with impunity. Nobody has cared for a long time. You talk to people who've been in Palestinian solidarity movement for decades, up until 2023, they would have regular marches, 1,000 people on those marches. People would say they cared, but it wasn't a big issue. And it really wasn't until this genocidal intensification happened that this massive movement appeared. I kind of think it took both the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign and the Western states completely off guard, because I think we'd become so mired in this anti-Arab, anti-Muslim thought process that neither group really thought that anything would happen. But I guess just the shock of it and the intensity of it really just woke people up.
I think social media is a double-edged sword as far as the topic goes, because on the one hand, since 9/11, we've had 24 years of, just absolutely absurd posts on Facebook about how Muslims are building a secret army in Britain or America or wherever, and stories about how, I paid for some Muslim woman shopping at Tesco and she told me to stay out of the city centre on the 3rd of January. Just constant scaremongering. Oh, they come over here, they burn the poppies, they they disrespect our brave troops and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's
you get all of that,
job.
obviously. But you get all of that scaremongering and all of that misinformation and everything. But at the same time, when the genocide intensified, people saw got directly to their phone. They got a lot more sort of information directly from Gaza. Yeah, unfiltered. Yeah. And I think people, as much as it might some people might like to think people are very easily led, and it's propaganda is a simple thing that's we've mastered, the governments have mastered it down to a perfect science or whatever. I don't think they have, and I think seeing the atrocities unfold in real time, genuinely horrified, a large amount of the population who you wouldn't traditionally consider to be because the papers and the news and dipshits on social media would portray it as lefty lovies caring about this stuff that doesn't really matter or whatever. But a lot of people who you wouldn't traditionally consider to be lefties or activists or campaigners or anything saw that and just reacted the way normal, they reacted in a very human way. And I think the ceasefire has possibly dulled that somewhat, because people now just assume, it's over now, it's settled down. But I think one thing that has sort of kept the sort of activism alive, I think Labour's absolutely farcical overreaction to the protests, and the fact that you see them every week arresting pensioners and people in wheelchairs and so on for just for holding placards has done a lot to sort of, because people people hate the fucking government that we've got now. You know what I mean? The government are absolutely just making everyone's lives as miserable as possible.
Yeah, it's a government of national unity in that everybody fucking hates their guts.
Yeah, and so people hate they hate the government. They're predisposed not to trust the government, and then they see the government arresting pensioners, disabled people, priests. And you just you see that and you go, well, those guys probably on the right side. You know what I mean? If the government is calling in the police from Northern Ireland to help arrest people for sitting holding signs, then maybe the government's wrong, And I think that's kept it alive. But yeah, social media I think was a godsend for the Palestinian people throughout this escalation of the genocide.
Yeah. I think there's a couple different you can see the crisis mode that not only Western states but the international system itself has gone into since 2023. Part of it is that you're definitely right. You can see how much they are worried about the live streaming of the genocide through things like TikTok, and the fact that the US has went to buy out TikTok so that they can more effectively control it. and like through the British states clamping down of protests. But you've also seen it, and you see it all the time on the international level with UN figures or international lawyers constantly freaking out about the lack of legitimacy that the international system will hold if they fail to do anything about Palestine. You speak to international lawyers and they are concerned about the international system and the legitimacy of the international system, and that then makes them care about doing something, the bare minimum, to organize some sort of ceasefire, hence the current, UN vote to colonially, occupy Gaza. They're doing that because they don't want the international system to fall completely out of legitimacy. And secondarily, they care about Palestinians. So you can see the crisis mindset occur at both national and international level, which I think does demonstrate some strength of the Palestine Solidarity Movement and the international, sort of loose coordination of it in being able to make those states panic to some degree. And obviously we shouldn't jerk ourselves off about it because fucking you look at everything. But
it's still just posting,
neither Yeah, but neither should we it's easy to go both ways. We're great, but also that shit and it doesn't matter. It does matter. What we've done does matter. And that is important to some degree. And I think in terms of what we should do, going back to, I guess, the original question, it kind of does filter off that classic C.L.R. James quote about fighting for justice in other countries means ending imperialism in your own. And that gets right down to just organizing mass political movements in your own states against imperialism, closing down arms factories and ending arms trades. That's the sort of stuff that is important, that needs to happen to end occupation.
I also always think that that mindset is why the state had to react so I think in the case of the banning of Palestine Action, I think Keir Starmer, he has always been a creature of the state, but I think that was more the state acting through the Labour Party than anything else. I think they saw that level of disobedience as much more of a direct threat to them, and not just because some fucking planes got a bit of paint on them, but because it also showed how easy it was to get to these sites, how fragile the state can be, how easy it is to perform actions that are beyond the bounds. And I always think that the banning of Palestine Action was really a sort of an almost panic reaction by the state that this could not be allowed, because if this were to be allowed just once, then the precedent would be set that it could happen again. And I think part of the reason that's also why you see 80-year-old blind vicars being arrested and dragged off the street. It's for the same reason. It's because the British state is in that sense almost doesn't matter if the Tories or Labour are in charge. It is an almost 1,000-year-old institution that above all seeks its own, perpetuation. I think that's why Palestine Action had to be banned. That's why Jeremy Corbyn had to be removed from any possibility of attaining power, because it even at the idea of being cornered, being put in a place where it was not the victor, it has to lash out and do almost anything necessary.
Before we move on, I just want to say as well, I would strongly object to the characterization of Palestinian support on social media as just posting, because there has been a staggering amount of direct aid, money raised for direct aid and that. So, a lot of people are just sort of put a watermelon emoji in your display name, call it a day. I don't, you know what I mean? I think that's good. I don't think it's particularly achieving a lot, but the more people that do it, the more it normalizes the practice. But I think like a lot has been done on social media that has actually achieved a direct good for the Palestinian people, because like, you know, I mean, a lot of us have given quite a bit of money to them, you know, and it's and as we should, frankly.
Yeah.
So I think the increasing policing of protest is not just, I don't think it's just a British state thing. It's something that has been increasingly a feature of neoliberal governance. A central part of neoliberalism is the ensuring that no democratic or quote unquote collectivist control of the economy or the market can happen. And that means clamping down on any kind of direct action or protest which could affect that. Immediately cracking down on union action from Thatcher is a good example. But it's been increasing and increasing and increasing over the years and across different neoliberal states. And you've seen it happen with both environmental protest and Palestine solidarity protest. There was a recent report by a police monitoring body that just was titled "This is Repression," which looked at how the increasing policing and the increasing repression of both environmental groups and Palestinian solidarity groups has become a constitutive feature of policing in the UK. And I think these are connected issues that go way back to like the construction of neoliberalism, the construction of the terrorist, and also play a part in accelerating the fascist transformation of our state.
Yeah, I think it's also like Keir Starmer's Labour Party, a Labour Party that has excised as best it can any notion of like whether it be like soft left, essentially outwards, on that end of the political spectrum, a party that is outright run by a bunch of reactionary, anti-liberty, and I mean that in like the real sense, not the American sense, anti-liberty politicians. And because shits obviously though they are, like the Tories still had had David Davies, his opposition to ID cards and all that stuff. Like there were people like him in the Tories who I suppose had something of like a counterbalance in their backbenches or what have you. Whereas now that we've got this version of the Labour Party, they've pulled the skin off of the Terminator that was 2000, Tony Blair's Labour.
Yeah. And also specifically and admittedly just selected for no David Davies, no one of principle. They want a fucking coterie of jellyfish, Yeah, and this is like the perfect design. Yeah, and this is the perfect vector for these crackdowns, this obscene draconian crackdowns on free speech. Like where are you now? Free Speech Brigade, whatever the fuck you're called. Free Speech Union, is that what they're calling themselves?
It is.
That's Toby Young's dogshit.
Yeah, Toby Young.
Young's crowd.
That's the prick. Not to worry. It's normal. The two-state solution is essentially dead, right? We've got peace talks that went for the last 2 decades that have obviously fizzled out to nothing. The 1967 borders that are internationally agreed, that a two-state solution would follow. That's all dead. There is no Palestine left, essentially, for a Palestinian state to arise from, right? And this has led on to what prompted me to ask John to come on tonight to talk about the cunning recognition of Keir Starmer's Labour Party. And John, would you like to tell us a bit more about that excellent video, which, by the way, you should go and watch on YouTube, John Duncan on YouTube?
Thank you. So cunning recognition is a concept which has come from the human rights literature, which basically points out that people are often only given rights when they decide that they are going to assimilate into a particular way of being. Usually it's indigenous people. They are granted recognition or granted rights so long as those rights are used to engage in the colonial marketplace. The right to development of their land, for example, is granted to them alongside the recognition of them as an indigenous group. And the Oslo Accords is one of those things which I think is a good example of cunning recognition, because like we say, the PA or the PLO was recognized by the Israeli state as an existing body. But part of that recognition came by assimilating Palestine into circuits of Israeli domination, and legitimized it in the eyes of like the international aid community, the international economic and trade community. And that cunning recognition comes with the complete destruction, as you say, of the possibility of a two-state solution. It is recognized that a two-state solution is possible, but the reality is it's dead. And therefore, with the only recognized solution being a dead one, unless you agree to only pursue this dead solution, you are an illegitimate figure. If you're Palestinian, you're an illegitimate Palestinian. You're a bad one, you're a terrorist. If you're one of the international solidarity campaigns and you don't support the two-state solution, you are either a complete wacky liberal who doesn't understand the real politic of the situation, or quite often you're just like an anti-Semite who wants to see the end of the Jewish homeland and therefore the end of Jews. So cunning recognition in this case really is just another tool of facilitating the ongoing colonial genocide of Palestinians. And it leads you to the inescapable conclusion that the only just solution to this occupation is the decolonization of the entirety of the land, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. The one-state solution being a single democratic Palestine on all of historic Palestine, rather than a separate sort of balkanized state that even just on its face, it's ridiculous to have a Palestinian state which is islands within a colonial occupation. So really the sort of end point of recognizing that the Oslo Accords are part of cunning recognition is realizing that the only solution is decolonization in the entirety.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it being Keir Starmer, his announcing of the British state recognizing the state of Palestine took a wonderful form of words, which I'm going to read to you now. Unless the Israeli government takes substantive steps to end the appalling situation in Gaza, no specifications as to what that means,
just a situation, sure, why not?
Yeah, just the situation. Yeah. Reaches a ceasefire, makes clear there will be no annexation in the West Bank, and commits to a long-term peace process that delivers a two-state solution. So it's not, a declaration that the Palestinian state has a right to exist and a right to self-determination. It is conditional, essentially a threat to Israel, an empty one, of course, to stop making things quite so bad.
Like they did recognize the Palestinian state, so it's not empty entirely. Like a Labour MP, if they were on Praxiscast, which I'm sure they probably will be, as big fans of the show.
Yeah,
come on,
Luke Akehurst, come on the pod.
Yeah, look, come on and say that you did actually recognize Palestine, and that's what makes you hate Keir Starmer, probably. But we did, like the Britain did, alongside, I think it was Canada and. Was it Spain? There were three other states. Britain
France?
did.
Yeah.
They did recognize Palestine, but they only did so within the context of the Oslo Accords, and that recognition, as well as being, like completely cynical and obviously like just disgusting in how that was done. the fact that they did it is nothing. I don't even know if it's particularly cunning in the case of like they're so pathetic they've done nothing. Nobody actually gives a shit because the actual cunning recognition happened 30 years ago.
Yeah. Did we even stop selling them arms?
No.
Was it? I can't remember if it was 7 or 13 licenses, something like. It might have been
it was like
13
5%
licenses,
of the
which was
total
7%.
or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. So, which have been reinstated last I checked. So we're still doing the stuff that we said we were going to stop sending them. We're now sending it to them again. So that's great.
Yeah, it was a complete like fantasy. The moment he because the idea that Keir Starmer could threaten anyone and be taken seriously is laughable. But like, do you know what I mean? The idea that the British Prime Minister, and a British Prime Minister as universally loathed and ineffectual as him, could threaten Israel at, like, you know what I mean, at the height of its power. It's backed by like an openly fascist United States, and you know it has carte blanche to do whatever it fucking wants. No one can rein it in. And the idea that like he could just stand up and tell them to behave themselves, you know, put them on notice, and that would have any kind of effect whatsoever, let alone produce like a two-state solution, is farcical at best. You know what I mean?
I'm reminded of that. I think it was a Chinese diplomat who was on the news, basically being asked what they were going to do about if Britain kicked off about what's happening in what happened with Hong Kong. And the diplomat's like, who the fuck are you? Like, why should we give a shit?
Yeah.
Which is like representative, like Britain on the global stage as a whole.
Yeah, I'm sure it made Keir Starmer feel really statesman-like, though. You know,
however, Jamie, there is one group of people that find Keir Starmer absolutely abject terror, and that is what remains of the Labour left. Like, that is the one constituency that, you know, wakes up in a cold sweat thinking about Morgan McSweeney.
Yeah, well, rip to John McDonnell, but I'm different.
Maybe we'll start a petition about getting John a nice like jumper or something. I feel like now is a good point to move on to sort of our final section, which is a bit more open ended, which is what happens next. What we can expect from things like future ICJ rulings and any ramifications that they might have. You know, the extent of British and Western complicity, and whether or not this is going to come to nothing, essentially, as a blowback for the West, and precipitate a complete breakdown of the so-called international rules-based order. I'm going to throw it open to the floor.
In terms of what I think, the ICJ will probably rule that at least some of the acts were genocidal. I would be frankly amazed if they didn't. Because the evidence is so compelling. All but one judge, and one judge being a judge who, in her dissenting opinion, cited that support for Israel was mandated by God because we are reaching the end times of humanity. This is true.
Rational, then.
That is actually her justification for the dissenting opinion. All
is she
but
American
her,
by any chance?
Yes. Nigerian.
Oh no! You're right. She's used to the Nigerian one. Yeah. But this is that This is that whole thing where, especially evangelicals, believe that like Israel must be controlled by Israelis because otherwise, like, certain things in the Book of Revelations can't occur. Essentially, you need an Israel to exist in order for the final battle between good and evil to occur, and in order to hasten that along, you must support Israel.
Yeah, and it's a massive feature of American Christian Zionism as well.
Yeah, we all remember when Jesus said, if there weren't an Israel, we'd have to create one.
So basically, I would be amazed if the ICJ didn't rule at least some of the actions of Israel to be genocidal. It's going to happen. That will probably have some implications on what the Genocide Convention means through jurisprudence, but those sort of questions are frankly quite dull and don't really have an impact, I think, on the actual politics of it. if they didn't rule it genocide, the legitimacy of the ICJ would be in tatters. I think that would be such a massive crisis for the, quote unquote international rules based order that it just will not happen. In terms of what will happen, I think unfortunately at this point we're just going to see an increasing encroachment, probably a restarting of extreme violence, and it won't be until the movements have reached such a critical mass across the world that we will see, and I fully believe we will see, the decolonization of Palestine in our lifetime. But I think it will only happen after things get worse.
Yeah, I mean, I think we mentioned this on the podcast before, but in apartheid South Africa, just before things really did start to come apart for that incarnation of South Africa, it did start lashing out against its neighbours, against its, the dominated local populace, essentially, which obviously was horrendous. But then at the same time, apartheid then did get dismantled eventually. So yeah, this is one of the points I did want to discuss, which was a free Palestine in our lifetimes ? I mean,
yeah, I do think it will come, but I do think that, like, if you're talking about the rules-based international order and the International Criminal Court and the ICJ and all that, like all these institutions, for me, I think the shattering of that as an idea, that sort of post-Cold War idea of a sort of, global hegemony and liberal, a sort of purity of liberal idealism has, like, I think it died already in 2004. It died in the sands of Iraq, and ever since we've just seen it like be torn further to shreds, because it has revealed what I think to me was always what it was supposed to be, which is like, no, these principles apply, but not to us. They apply to the perpetrators in Yugoslavia,
African
the perpetrators
states
in
a lot at the time,
Rwanda.
yeah.
They apply to subordinate states that are not, quote unquote Western democracies, and especially they don't apply to states with lots of guns or atom bombs. These were all because I think when these were founded in that moment of optimism, in the two moments of optimism post World War II and post the fall of the Berlin Wall, is I think this idea that there was some kind of universalist spirit, but I think what you're now seeing in so many countries is this sort of return to nationalism, to overt state power, to a kind of the primacy of the state, and I think that the breaking has already occurred, and I don't think these institutions are irrecoverable. I do think they can be, but I think what you would need to see a free Palestine in our lifetime is a breaking of the settler colonial genocidal state of Israel, but that can only occur essentially and only if you have a sort of unprecedented revolution in the United States. And I don't think that's impossible. I think we're nearer now than we have been since 1776 or whatever it was, but like, that is the only way it can happen, because as long as the global hegemon throws its arm over Israel, and that is a bipartisan, locked-in, hammered-down thing, you will not see this change. So I think things that give me hope is like,
the rise of the Chinese century.
Yeah,
and
maybe
the century of American humiliation. I mean, these are all things
that would be fun, and I hope we're in it. But like, I have not seen. I could be wrong. I don't study China nearly enough, but like, I haven't seen a great deal of interest in China in pursuing these things. Plus, I also think that like what China has with its its own domination politics in Tibet with the Uyghurs and other populations, I think that China would be very reluctant to play a leading role in this, because it would point out the flaws in their own system.
Yeah, I'd love for them to do it, but I don't.
they haven't shown any inclination yet, and I don't see for them what will be the strategic purpose for the Chinese Communist Party to engage in that manner so overtly.
Well, what I'm sort of getting at is that as the United States may or may not do in the near future, like disintegrate. Well, probably not disintegrate in the like complete sense of like, you know, it becomes 51 nation states or anything, but its position as the global hegemon begins to weaken further as it has been for decades. It is, you know, I suppose it's a hope that as it has to sort of redirect itself ever more inwards in order to try and keep itself afloat. What, you know, as we talked about the AI bubble bursting and all of the crackdowns that it seems to be doing in perpetuity at the moment. It is going to, I would hope. Again, this is probably entirely hope. Sorry for doing this on the podcast.
No, we are allowed to have hope occasionally. Yes, a little.
Essentially, with the collapse of the United States as the global hegemon, then perhaps this could mean that this would precipitate the collapse of Israel as a settler colonial state as well. By China standing there and just sort of, you know, building tall, as it were. Like, yeah. I'm not saying that China's going to intervene in Gaza. I think that that is hope even beyond the scope of this little section that I'm allowing myself. But just by displacing the United States.
No, I mean, China's not going to intervene and stop Israel from existing. That's just not going to happen. But I always have an irritating amount of hope in the ability of, you know, the global masses to form revolutionary activity, and through activity sharpen the resolve and sharpen their critique, to get Luxembourgist about it all. I will always and kind of need to have that level of hope that it will and can happen.
For a genuine second there, I thought, I was like, what does the Grand Duchy have to do with all this? And then I was like, I think on that note, I think let's end on a positive note for a change. How about we do that?
Yeah, let's leave it on a positive note and pivot to comment or commentariat. John, I don't know if you're familiar.
I'm not.
Yeah, it's a game that we play at the end of, well, some episodes. It depends what Jamie can find. The aim of the game is to determine whether the quote that Jamie is reading out has come from an actual thing written by a quote-unquote journalist, or has been written in the comments section of one of our many deranged publications.
Okay. Oh, okay.
All right, so we've only got a few tonight because it's getting harder and harder
Slim
to find.
Pickens.
Harder and harder to find anything on a British newspaper's website that isn't just like incoherent screaming about like immigrants. You know what I mean? Or any other minority group of choice. However, so make the left pay 50% tax, 25% VAT, have a premium on their council tax. Okay, I know this isn't feasible or possible, but they'd soon change their pathetic little brains. Is that comment or commentariat?
It's got to be a comment, right? Like, there's the okay, this isn't feasible thing. Surely.
The hope is obvious in your voice. I'm saying this is commentariat.
I'm saying this is commentariat.
Oh, well, that was a comment.
Oh no!
Thank God.
Yeah, comment in the Mail on a Quentin Letts column about Shabana Mahmood's new immigration stuff.
Okay.
Okay.
Second one. And no doubt they have found a Palestinian flag frozen in the ice. Is that comment or commentariat?
I'm saying comment again.
I'm saying comment as well.
Frozen in the ice? Is this some kind of weird anti-climate change screed or something? Comment.
Yeah, that was a comment in the Express. Scientists discover record-breaking 6 million year old ice in Antarctica.
Oh, fuck off. Just...
Oh, Jesus.
All right, last one. Even in the 80s, the BBC's Only Fools and Horses was role-reversing white working-class English lads as inner-city muggers. Casualty was showing the police as thick, racist pigs when, even in those days, they were trying to contain an explosion in ethnic street crime. Is that comment or commentariat?
I'm going commentariat. Yeah.
Oh, this has Only Fools and Horses, so this is Richard Littlejohn.
Oh, yeah, of course it is.
It was actually a comment on a Richard Littlejohn column. Nick Robinson is deluded if he thinks that this was a right-wing coup. The BBC turned its back on the values of proper people years ago.
Oh, God.
Sure, why not? Just...
What a delightful bookend to this episode.
Yeah. Good thing we ended on hope, hey?
Yeah.
Thank you very much for joining us, John. It was great having you.
No, thanks for having me. It was my pleasure.
Yeah, it's been a good episode.
And if people want more John in their lives,
where should people go? Where can people find you? Put your postcode, your address, and your phone number in the comments.
Yeah, do you want my bank details as well? Or
I've already got those. If you just get me your PIN number, that'd be great.
1664. No, if you want to find, I'm John the Duncan everywhere. Fucking YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, the other places as well.
Cool, fantastic. Subscribe early, subscribe often.
Yeah.
Rob,
and you can subscribe early and subscribe often to us at patreon.com/praxiscast for 2 bonus episodes a month. Access to our Discord, where also we post like off-cuttings from our episodes, which are very good, but for various reasons can't make it into the episode. You can find it's coming up on Christmas, so you can find at praxiscast.tmail.com you can find various bits of merch to keep your body warm during the cold and dark months. And you can also warm yourself by the fire of our streaming, and I've forgotten what the fuck's going on there, so I turn to our streamers.
Thursday at 7, if David and Jamie are about, and most Sundays at 6:30.
Yeah.
Twitch.tv/PraxisCast.
Yeah, and for like the finer details of that, please also, follow us on Blue Sky. It's at PraxisCast. .social right. .whatever, but you can just type in PraxisCast.
just pull up your word processor and type in PraxisCast, and everything should become clear.
Exactly.
And with that, I think we're saying goodbye. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.